Hey Starshines, I'm Sylvia-Moonbeam and welcome to another episode of my D&D character, a series where I talk about a D&D or Pathfinder character I've created, their inspirations, the powers they have, and just for fun, even talk about what kind of magic deck they would play and name a couple Pokemon they might use. Today's subject is my character, Cka'a Heartwood, so let's dive in. Cka'a is a character I originally created for a friend's Waterdeep campaign in D&D 5e shortly after leaving college. Similar to videos you may have seen by YouTubers like Tulok the Barbarian, ever since I started exploring the wonderful worlds of Pathfinder and D&D, I wanted to make XBs of certain characters I enjoyed. And I'll be honest, Cka'a is an XB of Miko from Battleborn. Just like Miko, Cka'a is a humanoid plant creature who's essentially the last of their hive mind, wears a mushroom hat, and has healing powers. Cka'a also goes by they/them pronouns, as they were once part of a hive mind and have no biological sex, just like Miko. One of the few characters I've actually drawn myself, Cka'a has evolved very little since I first came up with them. As you can see in the 3 drawings I'm about to show, Cka'a has long, spindly limbs like a tree, with patches of thorns around their shoulders, forearms, and shins to act as natural armor. Kka'a's bag holds healing supplies, as well as the seeds of their grove, in hopes of regrowing them someday. Trust me, the seed thing will make a lot more sense once we get into the Pathfinder part. So, how is Cka'a different? Unlike Miko, who is a fungus and has some poison-related powers in addition to their healing, Cka'a is more plant-like and has powers relating to thorns, vines, and brambles. I even retconned that the mushroom hat was just an aesthetic choice, originally having these antler-like branches on their head that snapped off and began wearing the mushroom cap to cover their head. Kka'a's thorn and bramble magic is in itself a reference to the Spriggans from the Elder Scrolls series, as well as one of my all-time favorite magic cards, Thorn Elemental. Cka'a is also far more friendly with their teammates than Miko is, often using unusual terms of phrase, a trait inspired by a similar character from League of Legends, Ivern the Green Father. I also do recognize that Cka'a bears a passing resemblance to Pax from the Mushroom Man games, though I will admit I found out about the Mushroom Man games after I created Cka'a, so it's more of a similarity than an inspiration. Standing at 7 feet tall, Cka'a is too short to be a treant and too intelligent and magically gifted to be a myconid. Plus, treant and myconid are not playable races in Dungeons & Dragons, and Pathfinder doesn't necessarily have anything Spriggan related, so it took a little bit of research to find a race in both games that would accurately reflect kind of the plant nature of Cka'a. Luckily, Pathfinder does have a plant-like race that can fit our purposes, called the Goron. Gorons receive a +2 bonus to Constitution and Charisma, but suffer from a -2 Intelligence. I justified this Constitution bonus by having Kka'a's barky, thorned body be tougher, also reflected in the +2 natural armor they get as a defensive trait. The Charisma bonus was justified by Cka'a being a trained healer with a soothing voice. The dip in Kka'a's intelligence, however, was fairly simple to explain. They've never touched a book in their life, growing up in nature and learning everything through word of mouth. Gorons also receive 2 unique abilities because of the regenerative nature of their plant bodies. Past life knowledge gives them genetic memory, kind of like you would see in like the Assassin's Creed games, making up for the decrease in intelligence by giving them instead all knowledge skills as class skills. The other, and the most interesting, is seed. Similar to Groot from the Marvel movies, Cka'a can expel a seed from their abdomen, essentially killing off their old body to avoid physical death by essentially ejecting a pod that has their soul. In a campaign with some downtime in, say, a local town or city, 2d6 days is practically nothing. While Goron's body regrows, the rest of the party could do jobs around town or even just maybe kick back and relax a bit. And in the long run would end up saving a lot of gold without having to spend it on resurrecting a party member. As a healer, it makes the most sense for Cka'a to be a cleric. What's really cool about Pathfinder clerics is they actually get 2 domains. Unlike D&D 5e domains, which offer 2 spells per level and have several bonuses as you level, each Pathfinder domain only offers 1 spell per level and only 1 or 2 bonuses per domain. For Ckaa''s god, the only god that featured healing and plant magic was the goddess Alleria. Of course, check with your DM to see if you can also just make a custom god if you're not a big fan of the goddess Alleria. Healing domain works exactly as you would expect for a cleric, giving you access to all of the major healer spells, and at level 6 empowering all of your cure spells by 50%. What's really neat is the first ability, Rebuke Death, which acts kind of like Pathfinder's equivalent of Spare the Dying. Plant domain gives some really cool powers, such as Bramble Armor, which pokes our foes back when they deal melee damage. This goes really well with Ckaa''s higher constitution and natural armor that I mentioned, plus being able to gain Bark Skin as a 2nd level spell. Of course, Thorn is a subdomain of Plant, which is what we're going to go with. This also gives us the 4th level spell, Thorn Body. Thorn is a really cool subdomain, replacing Plant's Wooden Fist ability with the ability Cruel Thicket. Essentially, it's an entangle spell that deals damage, and it also grants us the 3rd level spell, Thorny Entanglement, from the Plant domain, while still allowing us to keep Plant domain's 5th level spell, Wall of Thorns. Personally, my favorite spell between Plant and Thorn has to be Thorn Javelin. While a single javelin isn't very powerful, it allows us several ranged thrown attacks. This can act sort of like a cantrip at higher levels, allowing us several turns of thrown weapon attacks, which can be useful for attacks of opportunity. Come D&D though, things aren't as easy. First off, there are no Gorons, or, like I said, playable Treants, or playable Myconids. So I went with the next best thing, a Warforged. Now, a robotic race may seem like an odd substitute for a plant creature, and you'd be right, but Warforged have an ability called Integrated Protection, which allows you to select different armor levels for your Warforged, and the lightest of these armor levels is called Darkwood Core. Personally, I would justify this as making it kind of the equivalent of Cka'a being a wood golem. While it does offer the lightest AC of the 3, if you have higher dexterity and a shield, you can definitely get your armor up a bit higher to make up for the loss in metal armor that you're wearing. Plus, you could always cast Shield of Faith or potentially gain shield or mage armor through alternative means to boost your AC even higher. Naturally, all Warforgeds get a +1 to Constitution, with your additional bonus coming from your subrace. Warforged has 3 different subraces, though I personally prefer Envoy. Envoy gives you a +1 to 2 different stats. I would personally recommend Wisdom for your spellcasting, and you can either give another +1 to your dexterity to help assist you with dodging and with ranged attacks, or your constitution, both to get you higher HP and to help you out with concentration saves. Gaining a skill proficiency, a tool proficiency, and a language of your choice is all really useful and allows you to customize your Cka'a to how you want. For a background, I chose Inheritor. I personally think it's a really neat storytelling tool, though I will admit it is not one of the stronger backgrounds. Inheritor does grant you 2 additional skills and another language, but most importantly, your feature, which is your inheritance. For my Pathfinder version of Cka'a, their inheritance was a bag of seeds from their people that had fallen in battle. However, since you could argue that in D&D, Cka'a is a Warforged instead of a plant person, you could argue that the inheritance is instead maybe some old memory cores or some power cores from fallen Darkwood Warforged. Either way, Cka'a would want to find a new home for their siblings, to either regrow their siblings, or to find a new body for them to live in, depending on your flavor. Either way, it gives you a reason to go questing. As for a D&D class, however, you do have a couple options. If you built them as a cleric, the obvious option would be Life Domain Cleric. However, Life Domain doesn't offer any natural magic, any nature magic. So the first feat I would recommend taking is the Magic Initiate feat, choosing Druid. Since Magic Initiate gives us 2 cantrips and a first level spell from the Druid list, I would personally pick Druidcraft for a lot of effects that go well with Cleric's Thaumaturgy. These 2 are essentially reflavors of Prestidigitation. You can also pick Shillelagh, which is a wonderful cantrip allowing us to transform a quarterstaff into a magical weapon, or my personal favorite cantrip from 5e, Thornwhip. For the first level spell that Magic Initiate gives you, I would recommend Entangle or Goodberry, 2 spells that we would have originally received in Pathfinder. I did look at Nature Domain, by the way, to see if it was worth taking, and I'm not going to touch on it further. It's not bad, but it does deviate more towards animals and natural elements rather than plants, which is what I wanted to go for. However, the alternative to Cleric could be Circle of Spores Druid. As you probably know, Druid does offer a good amount of healing and crowd control spells. However, Circle of Spores allows us to trade in our Wild Shape ability for a host, pun intended, of really neat, flavorful abilities for a character that's essentially an ecosystem of plant or fungus spores. In fact, you could even multi-class Circle of Spores and Life Domain Cleric together. Since both classes are wisdom casters, multi-classing would really allow you to exemplify Ckaa''s original inspiration of Miko. So you have lots and lots of options. As a reward for making it through all of the D&D and Pathfinder talk, let's look at how I would cover Cka'a in 2 other fandoms. Given their status as a plant elemental who is also a healer, those are very much hallmarks of a green-white deck. Ckaa''s Selesnya deck would have some pretty big green-white players, such as Karametra, God of Harvests, who, I'll be honest, is basically a dead ringer for Ckaa''s god Ilaria. I would also include one of the 3 different versions of Trostani, the leader of Selesnya, as well as one of the 2 different versions of Dramoka, who is essentially the Selesnya dragon. Of course, we should also include a few look-alike cards that resemble Cka'a, such as Thorn Elemental, Faburo Elder, Forgotten Ancient, and especially Multani, Yavamaya's avatar, all of which would be welcome additions. Of course, we could also splash some black mana in the deck as well to add a few mushroom-headed friends. Spore-crowned Phalid and Slimefoot the Stowaway would fit in pretty perfectly, though Phalid Soothsayer is a dead ringer for my brain's imagination of Cka'a, and if I included black in this deck, I would be a fool to not include them. Meanwhile, if Cka'a was a character in Pokemon, I could assign them one of several potential character classes. Doctor would reflect their healing abilities, though both Gardener and Aroma Lady could reflect their plant powers. Though personally I would have a hard time picking between Gardener and Aroma Lady, since Cka'a is non-binary, so I would feel kind of weird giving them either a very masculine or very feminine character. As a Pokemon trainer, however, I would give Cka'a 6 Pokemon: Paris, Shiinotic, and Breloom, all because they have mushroom hats. I would have included Amoonguss as well, but I think that Roserade fits better for the grass and poison typing, also having thorned whips to poison their foes, and Weatherball to essentially reflect either a Sacred Flame or the Druidcraft spell. I would also include Ferrothorn for similar reasons, having spiky armor, thorn whips, and the ability to rapidly heal as a tank character. And lastly, I'd have to include Trevenant, because when else will I have a better excuse to include a literal tree with antlers than in a video about Cka'a? So, what do you think of Cka'a Heartwood? As many of you may have noticed, I've included Battleborn's Miko in my intro for a while now, so I'm really glad I get to share them and Cka'a Heartwood with you, because they're one of my favorite characters. If you enjoyed this video, hit the lunar laser like button below, make sure to zap the starshine subscribe button, and boop the moonbeam bell if you want to see more content like this. Until next time, I've been Sylvia-Moonbeam, and thanks for watching everyone. Bye!